La verdad nos hace libres.
Gracias por permitirnos ser parte de su vida. Esta es La Verdad nos hace libres y como todos los jueves estamos con nuestro corresponsal desde el área metropolitana de Nueva York, allá en Cold Spring, Juan Carlos Salcedo. Con él estaremos dialogando y dos invitados especiales tenemos para tocar el tema de las tácticas de acción en caso de rehenes. Esta es una pequeña introducción al tema de hoy.
Comandante Thor Eells es el director ejecutivo de la Asociación Nacional de Oficiales Tácticos. Eells es un graduado de la Universidad de Colorado y tiene una maestría en justicia penal. También es graduado de la Academia Nacional del FBI. Tiene más de 30 años de experiencia en el cumplimiento de la ley con el Departamento de Policía de Colorado Springs. La mayor parte de su carrera fue en operaciones tácticas donde ha servido como operador, comandante de equipo y comandante de división en SWAT. Además de su experiencia práctica, Eells tiene amplia experiencia docente en la Asociación Nacional de Oficiales Tácticos. Ha enseñado una variedad de clases para incluir SWAT básico, avanzado, rescate de rehenes, servicio de seguridad de alto riesgo, tirador activo y municiones menos letales. Actualmente es uno de los instructores principales de SWAT de mando y supervisión. Ha instruido a cientos de estudiantes a través de los Estados Unidos, Canadá, Europa y el Caribe. Fue uno de los miembros principales del comité en el desarrollo de los estándares de SWAT y ha sido reconocido como testigo experto en tribunales federales de tácticas, armas no letales y uso de la fuerza. Dr. Gregory Vecchi es actualmente un sheriff adjunto de la reserva en el departamento de sheriff de Buchanan County en Missouri. El Dr. Vecchi es profesor asistente de justicia criminal en Missouri Western State University, donde enseña temas de aplicación de la ley en la justicia penal en los niveles de pregrado y posgrado, así como a cadetes policiales en la Academia de Aplicación de la Ley. Vecchi también lleva a cabo investigaciones basadas en el comportamiento, entrenamiento y consulta en armas de fuego, uso de fuerza, negociación de rehenes, intervención en crisis, entrevistas e interrogación, además de detección de engaño, resolución de conflictos, evaluación de amenazas y protección personal. Vecchi publica en muchas de estas áreas y viaja por todo el mundo para ofrecer soluciones de consulta y capacitación. Sirvió en el FBI por 29 años, un servicio combinado en el ejército como agente federal. Durante su carrera, el Dr. Vecchi investigó el crimen organizado ruso, el tráfico internacional de drogas, el terrorismo internacional y nacional y los crímenes violentos. Fue jefe de la legendaria Unidad de Ciencia del Comportamiento del FBI y un negociador de crisis y secuestro del FBI.
Aquí estamos en La Verdad nos hace libres y vamos rápidamente hasta los Estados Unidos para hacer esta introducción y dar la bienvenida a nuestros invitados. Juan Carlos, un abrazo grande para ti allá en Nueva York.
Gracias, Roberto, muy gentil, muy amable, gusto de estar nuevamente con ustedes. Buenas noches a la audiencia de La Verdad nos hace libres, nuevamente desde los estudios en el Estudio 3 en Nueva York. Un saludo muy cordial a ustedes y al equipo que hace posible este programa. Como ya es habitual, cada semana ponemos a consideración de nuestra audiencia un tema de interés mundial y regional. Parecería que la intensidad y frecuencia de eventos de crisis que requieren intervención de fuerzas especializadas de la policía han crecido en gran número. En los Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, en 1980 se registraron 3.000 casos de intervención de unidades SWAT, equipos especiales de armas y tácticas. Al presente, el promedio de estas acciones e intervenciones es de 80.000 anuales. ¿Alguna vez se han preguntado cómo se preparan estas unidades? ¿Cómo deben ser desplegadas? ¿Cuáles son los estándares de competencia? ¿Es posible negociar en momentos de alta tensión y de ser así, cómo hacerlo y cómo se puede reactivar la crisis? Hoy tenemos a dos expertos de primer nivel mundial, el doctor Gregory Vecchi, ex jefe del legendario Laboratorio de Comportamiento Humano del FBI, y también con nosotros el comandante Thor Eells, director ejecutivo de la Asociación Nacional de Oficiales Tácticos, una organización dedicada al entrenamiento y la creación de estándares para los grupos de reacción de crisis en los Estados Unidos. Welcome, our guest. We're very happy and pleased to have you here in our program. This is such a complex subject, and we welcome you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We will start with the first question to Dr. Vecchi. You were chief of the legendary behavioral science unit, and we would like to know what was that all about and what were the goals and objectives of this group.
Okay, well, again, thank you for having me on. I'll try to be as brief as I can. There's a lot to that question. But the Behavioral Science Unit was established back in the early 70s. And it was basically, the purpose of it was threefold. We had three missions: research, training, and consultation. And our job was to understand offenders. And one of the things that we did, which was kind of started everything, was our interviews of offenders, primarily serial killers to start with, and serial rapists back in the 80s with John Douglas and Robert Ressler, who started that process. Went into the prisons and actually interviewed the offenders to get their perspective. And that's kind of how we started. Now, that doesn't seem to be a big deal now. But back then, no one ever did it. Everyone was studying the crime scenes. They were talking to the victims if they survived. They were talking to the witnesses and looking at the evidence and things like this. There really was no such thing as behavioral evidence, and certainly no perspective from the standpoint of the offender. So one day, John Douglas asked the FBI for permission to go into the prisons to talk to some serial killers, some offenders, because they were trying to understand that. And that was before they even coined the term serial killer. They didn't even have a name for it at the time. And the FBI said, absolutely not, you can't do that. And he went in there anyway and did it. And that led to kind of the path he took all the way to the 2009, 10, 11, when I was in charge of the unit. Offender, trying to get into the offender's head to understand their motivation, to try to get ahead of them. So we were looking for an unknown subject, trying to use behavioral analysis. So think serial killer, spree killer, mass killer came out of that. Victimology, studying the crime scene, behavioral evidence. And when I came into the unit, I moved it from violent crime only to looking at spies and cop killers and terrorists and hostage takers and bank robbers and computer hackers and a whole litany of offenders where I brought in experts from all over the world. And what we did is we studied these offenders so that we could then develop research and training, and then we did consultation, meaning that we would help on cases. And that process is what we used in order to put out the best methodologies for finding out the whodunits, as well as in which my specialty area was communication and crisis negotiation, and using behavioral analysis in furtherance of developing that methodology for crisis negotiators.
Thank you.
Tema realmente importante, las tácticas de acción en caso de rehenes, con dos invitados realmente muy especiales allá en los Estados Unidos. Al comandante Thor Eells, usted es director ejecutivo de la Asociación Nacional de Oficiales Tácticos en los Estados Unidos. ¿Cuáles son las actividades que realiza esta organización allá en Estados Unidos?
This is a question for Commander Thor Eells, and you're the director of the National Association of Tactical Officers. What are those activities that the association gets involved with, and how does it operate in the United States?
Well, our primary focus is training. We have a membership of 40,000 plus tactical officers from across the United States, Canada, as well as some international members in Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and even some from South America. And our focus is to provide these officers with specialized training in dealing with critical incidents to ensure that as they respond to them, particularly with the emerging threats that we're facing today, that they have the proper equipment and training to resolve these incidents in the most positive manner possible.
Thank you. Well, there's a question for Eells. Hostage, either as a consequence of a violent act, a terrorist act, or even a family in distress. What are those elements that are considered at the start of the operation by law enforcement and to face the situation and the aggressors? What are the first things that come to your mind?
Well, really, probably the two that come to the forefront of the mind is, one, we want to contain it. We don't want the problem to go anywhere that we can't manage it. And then secondly, one of the top priorities is to begin to calm the situation, to try and manage as much of the emotion that exists and begin to develop some sort of rational dialogue or opportunity to speak with the involved people and calm the emotion. We all recognize that it's difficult for people to think clearly when they're angry or when they're excited. And so if we can begin to use time to our advantage to allow these emotions to de-escalate, to calm, we tend to have a higher probability of a positive outcome. And so those are probably the two most important aspects. And then the other thing to be utilized is pre-planning and training. Is we want our membership, our officers, to anticipate the types of problems that potentially face and run through all the variety of outcomes and the influences that might impact their decision making. So we strongly encourage training and preparation before they're faced with these types of incidents to increase the probability that they're making decisions when they're actually involved in the middle of the incident.
At the moment of crisis, Dr. Vecchi, and same question, what are those things that come first to your mind as you are approaching the situation and how you go about setting the action of the team that will deal with the crisis?
Well, Commander did a fantastic job explaining it. First, typically, you're going to have containment. Containment meaning both physical containment with the tactical team, which is setting up perimeters to make sure that the people out of the site. And then more from my perspective in terms of negotiation and behavioral analysis, I'm looking at the offender, focusing on the offender. I want to deal with verbal containment. Okay, my job is to verbally contain the situation and immediately get that guy engaged in some sort of dialogue so that we can kind of figure out where he's coming from. Depending on the situation, in a hostage or barricaded situation where you have someone who is, holed up in a building, the only thing we can do at that point is to try to engage him in conversation, to influence him to come out at the end of the day simply because we ask him to. And there's a whole process to do that. And the commander just, focused on one of the main things. At least in the United States, probably almost all of the situations involve very highly emotional situations where you have someone who might be suicidal, they might have some personality disorder, or some mood disorder, they might be depressed. Their wife cheated on them, emotional situations. In those situations, we immediately want to try to contain it verbally and trying to first off, in these expressive type situations, we want to do two things. First off, we've got some credibility with that person. Some people call it liking us. Some people call it rapport, trust, whatever you want to call it. They have got to be engaged so that they want to talk to us. Because essentially, we're not part of the conversation. They don't want us to be part of the conversation. We've got to actually insert ourselves as a police officer because as you can probably imagine, this is the only situation that law enforcement deals with when the law enforcement officer is dealing with the suspect while the crime is being committed. That's something to really think about because he knows I'm a law enforcement officer and and he's in the middle of the crime. Every other situation is it's after the fact, doing a crime scene after the crime, or I'm in some sort of undercover capacity pretending not to be a police officer. So what I'm trying to do in these situations is influence, persuade that person to do it. I do that by making a connection, building that rapport, and then at the same time, I've got to de-escalate those emotions. And the very simple way to do that is through, we use a process of active listening, empathy, rapport, and influence, a process that we've honed down to a science that we teach to all our negotiators, including our tactical guys, so that we can also, they have an understanding of where we're coming from as negotiators, so everyone has the same operational picture.
Thank you.
Es interesante lo que estamos escuchando en relación a lo que ocurre con estas tácticas y estos momentos que son realmente difíciles allá, no solo en los Estados Unidos, sino en otros lugares del mundo donde se han presentado esta clase de acciones. Las operaciones ahora no solo son peligrosas porque son a plena vista, sino también debe lidiar con curiosos grabando con celulares para hacer escarnio en las redes sociales. Esta pregunta va para los dos invitados. ¿Cómo impacta esta libertad, entre comillas, a la labor de los equipos de SWAT en el trabajo que desarrolla?
This is a question for both of you, and we'll start with Commander Eells. Operations that are very dangerous, that involve SWAT teams, and but in our society today, we have a number of curious people, and we have everybody recording the events as much as they can, and then later on, this is spread out all over the social networks. So, how this impact the work that your teams do, and does it restrict in any way? Are they mindful of what's going on, or how do you approach that?
Well, we're fully aware that there are cameras everywhere in today's society. And in fact, in many cases now, we're the ones wearing the cameras. So the actual impact on the officers and how they go about performing their duties or the job at hand really is not affected significantly in any way. The only time that we are concerned about cameras is in the midst of an operation should the call evolve to a point where we have to do some sort of crisis entry to save the lives of those that we believe are in danger from grave injury, often the element of surprise is critical to that. And so if we're on live TV or somebody is streaming this live through some sort of social media medium, that has the potential to negatively impact our element of surprise. Other than that, we really continue to operate business as usual. It does not negatively or positively impact or affect our operations on a day-to-day basis.
Dr. Vecchi, do you have any comments on that?
Well, again, the commander's completely right on that. The only thing I would add is that, we factor that in. During an operation, we have a thing called operational security or OPSEC. And until the operation is over, no one has a right to know what we're doing. And so essentially what we end up doing is when I'm talking about the physical and verbal containment, so the physical containment, you're going to have various perimeters around there. So you have a tight perimeter around the crisis site, and you may have 2 or 3 other perimeters depending on the situation. You're going to block off roads, close the airspace so that news helicopters can't come over, and we're going to try to keep it as secure as possible until the situation is resolved and safe. And we're doing that for the safety of the officers, which in priority number 1 for me is safety of the officers. Is to go in on an emergency assault, and all that has to be done not secretly, but it has to be done securely, because we don't want to have the suspect be listening to the radio, looking on social media, and watch what's happening, because that's going to hurt our ability to handle the situation.
Well said. I have a question for Commander Eells. You have a tremendous emphasis on training. And at what point improvisation is important, and who makes that kind of decisions? Because you're dealing with a real situation, and what is the protocol to improvise?
Well, the honest answer is it would depend on the team. We have numerous teams, both local municipalities, counties, state, and federal agencies, and they all operate a little bit differently here in the United States. We don't have the same type of nationalist police force that most other countries in the world do. I mean, there are 18,000 plus law enforcement agencies in the United States, all of which perform and operate just a little bit differently. But our primary focus and our purpose is really, as we emphasize training, and officers become more and more proficient in facing the myriad of problems that come up, they get better at decision making. Our perfect world scenario is that all officers are so well trained that we can push down decision making and improvisation to the lowest level. So the youngest, most junior officer on the team is so well trained that they're able to recognize the uniqueness or the problem that develops in front of them and adapt to a new course of action that is likely to prove the odds of success. And as the doctor mentioned, we have very, very specific protocols and priorities, and we teach this on a national level. And the priority number one really is actually those that are in the gravest danger and who have the least amount of ability to help themselves. That's why we're there as law enforcement, is to help those that can't help themselves. And so we want the decision makers who are faced with the real-time intelligence problem in front of themselves to be able to make that decision, to improvise, to adapt, use whatever tactic is necessary to save life.
Thank you.
Continuamos con el diálogo y queremos hacer esta pequeña introducción porque se habla de la militarización de la policía en equipos tácticos en Estados Unidos, el uso excesivo de unidades tácticas. En 1980 en promedio era de 3,000 eventos en el país, hoy sobrepasa los 80,000 anualmente de estos. ¿Cuáles tienen que ver con ingresos por la fuerza a casas privadas?
Well, there's a question. We're unfortunately running out of time, so please, as quickly as you can, address the point. They're talking about a militarization of the police in the United States. In the 1980s, about 3,000 actions of SWAT teams. Today, in excess of about 80,000 annually. And 79% of those are having to do with private homes. So do you agree with that there is a militarization of the police in the United States, or that's not the case? Dr. Vecchi?
No, not at all. It's two totally different mindsets. Both carry guns, but there's a difference between rules of engagement and use of force. Okay, rules of engagements is what the military uses, where it could be that they get the okay to, shoot a rocket or a bomb at a bus that's full of children, and they go ahead and do it. And there's collateral damage, and it's unfortunate. As opposed to use of force, where the law enforcement officers have got to follow use of force, and we've got to adhere to that, and we can be prosecuted for that. The fact is that even though we use similar equipment, rifles, pistols, armored vehicles and things like this, we use what's necessary in terms of equipment to get the job done. And unfortunately, we're dealing with increased use of terrorism and IEDs and pipe bombs and automatic weapons and things like this. And so it's just like back in the days of the 80s when they had the Miami shooting of the FBI agents in Miami, Florida. They were completely outgunned. They had 6 shooters, little, Smith & Wesson 38s, right? And they got into a fight with guys that had got automatic weapons, and so we have to be able to have the proper equipment. Yep.
Yeah, we have a few minutes. Please, your comments, Commander Eells.
Well, there's no question that there has been a large increase in the number of SWAT teams in the United States as a result of the war on drugs, coupled with asset forfeiture and those agencies that are seeking to perhaps develop capabilities that they did not previously have. But the doctor does have a good point. I mean, we live in a different era post, September 11, in which we have law enforcement agencies that need to have the capability to respond to potential terrorist incidents while at the same time continuing to be able to serve warrants in high-risk situations in a safe manner. What we have tried to do is to provide the training so that the commanders and decision makers and police agencies know when best to use a SWAT team and when not to. And that right now is the most important distinction, is not creating a perception that the police are at war with the people, because we're not. And our primary purpose of SWAT teams is to provide a safe and effective response to critical incidents.
Well, I thank you both, and we just literally have a minute and a half. You both have amazing careers, very successful ones. I have a question. What do you wish you knew then when you started that you know today that will help you to do your job better? Dr. Vecchi, please.
In these type of situations, probably having more joint training and interactions with between the SWAT teams and the negotiators and the commanders, instead of everybody training in a bubble and then coming together and expecting them to work together, and you wonder why it didn't work. So I would like to have seen that, but I am glad to know that we are doing much better at that problem.
Commander.
Well, I think the biggest thing would be an emphasis on training high-level, high-ranking individuals in law enforcement to have a better understanding about the capabilities of negotiations and SWAT teams and how to most effectively use them. I think they are unfortunately in many cases under a misimpression of what can and cannot be done, and that is where these incidents usually go on. It's not at the low level, but it's the high level when we make improper decisions, or unfortunately, because we lack the courage to make difficult decisions in critical incidents that lead to tragic outcomes. So high-level training would be mine.
Bueno, el tiempo se nos ha acabado, pero sin lugar a dudas este es un tema muy importante, y para seguir escuchando, se nos quedaron muchas preguntas ahí para preguntar, pero yo creo que en una próxima oportunidad estaremos nuevamente invitando a estos dos expertos en tácticas de acción en caso de rehenes. Queremos agradecerle al comandante Thor Eells, ¿está correcto, Juan Carlos? Y también
sí.
al doctor Gregory Vecchi, el primero, el comandante Thor, que ha servido 30 años en el Departamento de la Policía de Colorado Springs en patrulla, investigaciones y SWAT. Y el doctor Gregory Vecchi fue miembro del FBI por 29 años bajo un servicio combinado en el ejército y como agente federal. Son personas que definitivamente saben de lo que hablan. Y muy agradecidos estamos aquí desde Bolivia por este tiempo de entrevista con nuestros invitados. Gracias, Juan Carlos, a ti allá en Nueva York.
Gracias, muy amable, y hasta la próxima oportunidad.
Un abrazo grande para toda la gente que sintoniza La Verdad Nos Hace Libres. Dios los bendiga. Será hasta la próxima.